Good day, everybody. So thank you for joining our third tutorial here for this course. And today the tutorial will be held, as you can see, in my kitchen. So I hope you're excited because I'm also excited about this tutorial. So let us start. So today's tutorial topic is on the models of population growth and health. And in today's tutorial, we'll be exploring about Malthusian theory of population growth and how you can apply that to your photo voice essay or to your tutorials or whatever you've done in the course. So let us start. So as you know, for every tutorial, I always give you an inspirational quote. So the inspirational quote for today's tutorial comes from Mark Twain, and Mark Twain is an American author. And Mark Twain said that don't let your schooling interfere with your education. So I'm sure that many of you have shown a lot of resilience and a lot of tenacity when it comes to dealing with the outbreak of the coronavirus. And now we are in lockdown. And so I want you to take this opportunity to continue to learn and to be able to finish your course, okay? So stay strong and it will be all right. So let's start. Let me give you a brief history of Thomas Malthus. So Thomas Malthus was born in the United Kingdom, and he was known to be a British economist, but he was also a Christian person, meaning he was like a reverend in the church. And his theory of population growth actually comes from the Industrial Revolution times. So it was 50 years after the Industrial Revolution. So what did Thomas Malthus say? So we need to understand, first of all, what happened before Thomas Malthus' theory of population growth. So before that time, we can see that in Europe, there was a population boom at the time. A population boom because many European countries thought that population and political and economic power go hand in hand. Meaning a country with a lot of population, a very populous country, is going to be a very powerful country, both politically and economically. So because of that, many of the countries thought it was a good thing to have lots and lots of people. So now we can see this in many of the discourses in the European history. But let's not just focus on that. Let us focus on Malthus. So let us go to the 8th slide. If you can go to slide 8 or 9, okay, slide 8. So according to Thomas Malthus' theory of population, he focused basically on food supply and population growth. Then let me explain about why he did that. If you think about the history of the world is basically a history of food supply. If you understand how to make food, how to store food, and how to transport food, and how to preserve food, and how to grow food, actually you are going to be the most successful society. Then let us see this in the history of Europe. As you know, all the continents have different shapes and sizes. Okay, so let us see the African continent. The African continent seems to be very narrow at the sides, okay, of the latitude, but its longitude is very long. It's actually a very long continent. From Egypt or from the North Africa to South Africa, it's very long. But Europe is more spread out wide, if you can look at the history. So go to your maps and then look into the history of the world. Okay, so I'll pause and so go and look at your maps. Okay, welcome back. So if you look into the maps, you will have seen, of course, that what I've said is true. Then what does this have to do with food supply and population growth? So because of the Europe, their latitudes are actually wider. They were more prone, or they were more advantaged to produce a lot of food. Okay, whereas in Africa, if you look into our shape, when you go to North Africa, you can see it's a desert. And then too, when you come to the Central Africa, it's like a forest. And then when you come to the Southern Africa by Namibia, it becomes again a desert. And by the time you reach to South Africa, it's a temperate region. So if you want to grow food, you have to be wary of the fact that you're going to meet many climates. And then maybe your food will not even survive in some climates. So that's why many African countries, you are mostly living as hunter-gatherer societies. They could move around. But in Europe, the condition was different. Their latitude was wider, so they could spread to the east and west and plant grains all over the place. And because of that, actually, Europe had the upper hand. They have now been able to produce more and more food and store more food. And that's why capitalism started in Europe. And that's why Europe is more prosperous than we can see in Africa, even today. So because of they produce more food, they could feed more people. And because they could feed more people, they can have a stronger people. People could live longer because they have food. And since they have food, it means that they live longer. It means they can produce more children. And because of they produce more children, they needed a government. And because of they had a government, they needed to write and record things. So most things started in Europe because of that. Okay, so the history of the world, remember, is the history of food supply. Then how does Malthus play into this? Let us see. Okay, so if we go down to the slides, Thomas Malthus argued basically that there's going to be a problem of overpopulation. Then why is that going to be a problem of overpopulation in Europe at that time? Europe population was booming and Europe was very powerful politically and economically. We've seen Napoleon Bonaparte. You see many of the Europeans, actually they even came and they colonized Africa because they were powerful, they had a lot of people, okay? Then what was a problem? What did Malthus foresaw that the Europeans couldn't see at the time? Actually, he saw that there's going to be a mismatch between population on one hand and food supply. Then what did he say? What did he say concerning this mismatch? Okay, so Thomas Malthus said that from his observance, food supplies actually grows arithmetically. Arithmetically means it's additionally, like 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1, like that. But population growth grows geometrically, meaning it multiplies over time. So over time, as you think about it, there will come a time when the amount of food will not be able to sustain the amount of the people. And so because of that, this is going to be a problem. Then Malthus warned against this in Europe. Then what was his warning? So Malthus suggested two things. The first thing is that there are going to be checks, okay? And these checks are either positive or they are going to be positive checks and preventative checks. Then what does it mean by positive checks? So according to Malthus, positive checks are usually have to do with wars, diseases, and then, when population decreases naturally. So, of course, war is not a positive thing. Then why did he call it a positive check? He meant they're natural, okay? Meaning the environment or nature itself uses it to fix the population. That's why it's positive. We don't have to do anything as people. Nature will deal with it, okay? And what we can do as people is the preventative checks, meaning we need to prevent our population. Then he suggested ways to prevent high population. The first way he suggested was late marriages. Like now you are coming to school, if you get pregnant or have a child, your parents are going to be angry with you, isn't it? Yes, so because of this, Thomas Malthus says, well, we should delay marriages. So if you're not married, then you have a child only when you're married. So if you're married at 34, you're likely going to have few children than if you're married at 19. Okay, so Thomas Malthus suggested this. Okay, but nowadays, of course, you can see that nowadays people have children without being married. But at that time, it was, you need to get married first, and then you can have children. And then Thomas Malthus also suggested other things like you have to have, the preventative checks, of course, would have to be delayed marriages, or you can abstain from sex, which most of you, of course, can do for a long time, which is, people usually wouldn't want to do it, but these were the preventative checks, means you need to prevent yourself from having children. So now we can come to see then, since Malthus thought about this a long time ago, this was in the 19th century, does his theory still applies to our current situation? So how will you use this, his thinking about your tutorial work? Now you have a photo voice essay, which is going to be for your exams, and you might need to use it in the real world. How can you apply his theories to the real life and to your photo voice essay? So now let us see in the case, now there's a corona outbreak disease. Okay, this is not the first time a pandemic have taken over the whole world. Yes, so as we see in the case of the outbreak of the recent coronavirus, we see that in many countries, many people have died, over thousands of people have lost their lives. So according to Thomas Malthus, this is a disease that is also a positive check to control the population growth. So not only diseases, but also wars. When people die in a war, Malthus attributed that to a way to reduce the population. Okay, so now let us see, as I've said earlier, is Malthus' theory of population growth still relevant to our times? Okay, what does that have to do with you and with your work? Okay, so let us think about this. So take a pause and then take a 5-minute pause and you think about it and write it down. Welcome back. So now, let me show you an example of how Malthus's predictions came true in our generation. Okay, you were not born by then, but it was in the 20th century. Okay, so can you see this picture on my laptop? You can see it. Okay, so please go to that slide and it explains about what happened 200 years after Malthus made this prediction about population growth. You can see this is a picture of the Bengal famine that took place in 1770. Okay, so this was a very devastating famine. Actually, about 10 million people lost their lives in this famine because now we've seen Malthus' prediction that population will outstrip food supply and then people will have to give up their lives. And then there's going to be war and there's going to be famine, diseases, and starvation. Okay, so we see this in the Bengal famine. I can't go in detail in that. You have your slides, so please go back into your slides and read about this famine. So we can see also in 1943, there was the second Bengal famine, and also we can see this was just before, towards the end of the Second World War. Okay, so there was another famine too, in which food supply actually could not catch up with the population and people have to lose their lives. Then as I explain why we're studying, what does this have to do with your studies? So as you know, you are going to be the future leaders of our society. Okay, in South Africa is looking out for you guys. Okay, when you're done with your studies, you have to be making policies for people. So now we can come to see, today in South Africa, we have many farms in which people can produce genetically modified food, and now they can produce food at a very cheaper cost. Okay, they don't need more lands or they don't need more resources to produce food, but actually now they can feed a lot of people. Okay, but let us think about our population. Is our food supply going to match with the population? Yeah, the UN have said maybe by 2050 we might be 9 billion people in the world. Okay, so we need to think about what policies can we put in place to be able to produce food to feed a lot of people. So that is why in your studies, when you're doing your photo voice essay, I want you to go into your communities, or in your communities that you're looking at, you look at what is the population size of that. If you're in Mitchell's Plain, what is the population size of Mitchell's Plain? Okay, is the Mitchell's Plain population experiencing a population increase or population decrease? Do parents have food to feed their children? So if you look into the health outcome, if you're taking a picture of a child that is malnourished, how can you be able to explain that in Mitchell's Plain situation? Okay, so you look at what Malthus says and whether what he's saying actually agrees to what you see in your community or whether it does not agree with it. And then you can formulate your theories on that. Okay, and then also if you live in Rondebosch, okay, when you go to Pick and Pay, there's all sorts of food here, many different food to choose from. Okay, and then you see how people live there. You can compare it to other places. Okay, and then you can be able to tell that even the population and food supply trends differ according to the races in South Africa. It also differs according to the age groups that you're looking at. And it also differs according to class structure. Those in higher class, they have access to organic foods. And then those in the lower class have access to only like pap and maize meal and other foods that they don't have a lot of protein. Yeah, so how does that even affect the health of these people? Okay, can they live longer if they live on fatty foods? Okay, so even the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, he explained about this. Okay, certain people from certain race and classes and gender, they are prone to eating certain foods. Okay, rich people love drinking wine, he said, and poor people love drinking beer. Okay, and then rich people love eating protein food. Okay, but he said poor people love eating starchy carbohydrates and fatty foods. Okay, so you can see the population and you can look at the outcomes. Okay, Black South African women are more prone to having diabetes. Okay, why is that? Why can't white South African women have diabetes? Their population is different, they belong to different population groups. Okay, so you look into the population group, how many black women are there, how many white women are there, what diseases are prone to those societies, and then you can see why is that. So how can we change that? Okay, so thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I tried my very best. This is not the best I can give, but I hope it will help. So I know many of you are worried about your photo voice essay. For now, your lecturer already told us she has not given us any directives on your exams or tutorials. She's awaiting the response from the faculty after the departmental meeting sometime this week. I'll let you know about the outcome. Bye-bye.